these works of art have been known to depress the autoimmune system. They made a scientific study of finding out the strength of the immune system before going in to see The Exorcist, for example, and then after a person came out. And just like any kind of depressing situation can sometimes lower our immune response, certain works of art can do that as well. And so if there are works of art that can depress our autoimmune function, I would think that there are also artworks that can bolster or strengthen our autoimmune function. And here we get into the idea of art as a kind of healing force. And so my idea is that some of these energetically charged works of art that show the light working through the body, and that the light is keyed with some sacred understanding of life and a connection with spirit and all, that these elicit a positive and somewhat healing response in the unconscious, that people look at the imagery and access the dimension of reality that the work was inspired by, because they're most always depictions of mystical experiences that, or vision states that occurred to me, and that then I'm trying to portray in the most direct way possible. And so if they do their job, most of the time I'm trying to bring the viewer toward a fuller, richer, deeper, higher moment, peak experience, mystical experience of reality that reinforces the reason for living, that life is worth living. Why? We can love each other. We can help each other. We can see the fabric of reality as the expression of God that it is. We can see deeply into the catastrophe of life, as some call it, and see the hand of spirit working. And if you provide little oases of meaning and sacred understanding for people, it's a way to strengthen and encourage the development and evolution of consciousness within that person, the viewer who's seeing the works of art. And so, in a way, in the same way that I've appreciated the sacred art of previous cultures and the kinds of access to higher reality that they provide, these kind of portals into the mystic reality and the great and boundless, beautiful, compassionate sensibilities that are expressed through this religious literature and through the religious art. For a contemporary sensibility that's outside of the denominations and looking for a more universal kind of spiritual meaning, I'd like to make works that resonate with that kind of sensibility. And that's why I put the light around the bodies, is to reinforce the light around all of us. Many artists would deny or look askance at the idea that what they're doing is a sacred activity. They'd find it laughable or silly, you know. They're making art. This is, they're showing it in a gallery. They're not showing it in a religious institution or cultural center like that. And some people are even offended at the idea of the spiritual. And in art in New York, in many ways, this is like the spiritual trenches here, you know, in the spiritual war or battlefield that's going on for the consciousness of humanity. So you have the deeply cynical, non-believing folks. Mostly, they're sensible and rational people who've just never had a mystical experience. And they are speaking the truth. You know, they think it's a lot of hogwash. And if it hasn't happened to them, they're being accurate in telling their truth. And perhaps they went to art school, maybe they like to draw, maybe they like the art game, you know? Artwork that's more looking into the marketability of itself or how it can position itself stylistically within the season, the art season. These kinds of intentions, you might say, are not directed toward bringing forth the sacred. These similar kinds of experiences of the higher realms, they basically are seeing that which we think of as our separate self in an environment that is surrounded by separate objects. The Buddhists have a beautiful word for it, that there is no independent arising, that all is interdependent, and one can't separate themselves from the whole of the cosmos. So even though in our little ego minds we walk around thinking, you know, I'm me, you know, in my little world, and everything else is outside of it and sort of is in, you know, you're trying to safeguard yourself from everything. In fact, you're one with everything. You couldn't be here if you weren't. And so it's really just revealing a more basic and primordial truth. And we're able to see not only are we creatures of the physical or mental dimensions, but we're creatures of a completely transcendental dimension as well, beyond all representation and beyond birth and death. These are the states that are damn hard to depict as an artist, but are the essence of the mystical experience, the transcendence of space and time, the ineffableness, undescribableness of it, a generally positive kind of and blissful, but awesome. The mysterium tremendum, as the Rudolf Otto in the Idea of the Holy talked about it. He said, it's not just, you know, flowers and bird songs, you know, God is an earthquake as well. You know, it's awesome, it's terrifying, it's, you know, you are one with the same force that it provides the spiral arms of the galaxy. That universal creativity is also what you are as well. And so when the mystic eye is opened and sees that, the person is forever changed. Well, there's certain events that occur in one's life that change everything. I think falling in love is one of them. And for me, taking psychedelics was a major thing that changed everything. It happens to be that I fell in love and took psychedelics on the same night as I met my wife, really, under my first experience of LSD. And that was 26 years ago. We're still together, still ever more deeply in love. And I think that LSD provided like Aldous Huxley said, it kind of cleansed my doors of perception so that I saw through the nihilistic surface realm. The material world became transparent to a potently meaningful and altogether sacred understanding of life, something that I had no way of preparing myself for. For the couple years previous to my taking LSD, which I took when I was 21, I'd been doing a number of performance art works that had to do with polarities. And I'd shaved half of my hair off, and I'd gone to the North Magnetic Pole. I'd done a variety of strange works that had to do with exploring dark side, light side, various kinds of ideas of the rational, the intuitive, hemispheres of the brain, things like that. And in the LSD experience, I had closed my eyes and I was in a kind of a spiralic tunnel, and I was in the dark and moving toward the light. There was a kind of it was a mother of pearl, kind of shimmery, pearlescent, iridescent kind of walls of this tunnel. And I was in the dark, and yet there was this kind of curl of this tunnel. And it was always just around the edge was this, where this light was coming from. And as it cast the light on the walls of the tunnel, I could see that from the very bright, it went through all the different shades of gray into complete darkness. And so this spiralic, dynamic tunnel of being in the dark and moving toward the light became a way for me to integrate the opposites. It was what I called a polar unity spiral. And suddenly, all the things that seemed like in conflict and opposition in my sensibility found a way of becoming each other. And so it was an experience of profound union inside. And it pointed toward a reality that I barely could imagine existed. And coupled as it was with meeting Allison, she was the only other person at this party that was tripping, it brought us together. And I called her up the next night and said, that was pretty incredible what happened to me. What happened to you? And she said, well, I've done that many times. And I said, well, can we get together and talk about it and things? And so she was happy to get together, and so we've been together ever since. And so it was a catalyst in many ways. It opened me up to a understanding that there's more to reality than just the physical realm. And it brought my wife and I together. So to me, it was very important. Since that time, numerous times that we've done journeys together, they've brought forth significant visions that I have to say this painting, Theologue, came directly out of an LSD experience. I was wearing a blindfold and sitting in a lotus position, and I was looking onto the horizon, and I could see this electric perspective grid. It was just like going on forever. But it also seemed like, oddly enough, I was projecting the perspective grid, and it was surrounding me at the same time. So it was an experience of projecting and being surrounded by your projection. That is this odd quality that the mind has. You know, when we dream in this sort of imagined 3D space or 4D space that we're walking through. We find buildings and things like that. Somehow in our minds, we're able to create space. And so this painting points to this strange capacity of perception to be simultaneously the cone of vision and the vanishing point of the composition. That this is Theologue is this dialogue with God, you know, and it's got a long subtitle. It's called The Union of Human and Divine Consciousness, Weaving the Fabric of Space and Time, in which the self and its surroundings are embedded. So we're projecting the space that we're surrounded by. The very odd thing that the mind does. There's nowhere out there. We're having this experience in our minds. Our minds are fabricating this space that we're surrounded by. Very curious. And so that's what this painting's about, and it happens to be my most popular painting. You know, we've sold thousands and thousands of posters of this. Numerous people have come up to me and said, man, I had an experience that was like that. I couldn't tell anybody about it. It was so weird, you know, but it was just like that, you know. And so now they have a thing they can say, I'm not insane. He had it too, you know. And so numerous people have come up to me and told me about this. So it's not alone, it's just one transpersonal experience that bears relationship with numerous other people's transpersonal experiences. And so tripping has, it's by far not the only way that I get imagery to work with. I mean, this world soul sculpture, I was just waiting for a train, you know, basically the subway train. I was tired after a day of teaching, and poof, there on the subway, kind of this sidewalk area, I saw this being that had this wings wrapped around it, and it had all this multiple eyes and things like that. It obviously wasn't, you know, just like the homeless guy that was right next to it, and so that was totally on the natch, you know. But the psychedelics, I think, have influenced or bent my sensibility so that it's sort of cracked open the doors of perception or cleansed the lens so that the membrane between the visionary realm and the physical realm are a little, that line is less hard. You know, now it's a little more permeable. And so numerous paintings were influenced by specific vision states that were accessed in entheogenic voyages, and numerous paintings came out of just a grace, you know, just a vision that got plopped into my consciousness. So I think there's a strong relationship between art and shamanism. The shaman's job is to journey inward and to access sort of the lower worlds and the middle realms and the upper worlds in this visionary dimensions of reality. They're going there for the sake of healing. Once they've become shamans, they're not just shamans in training, but when they're working for the good of the healing of their community or particular people who have some kind of soul illness or other kind of ailment, you know, in this way, maybe it's stretching it to say that the artists in general are oriented toward the same kind of shamanic quest. So I would say that, at least for a number of artists, the shamanic model of the one that journeys inward and then brings out certain truths that may provide some kind of healing or meaningful understanding for the community. This is a sort of a model of a kind of sacred function that a number of artists can relate to. And those in performance art and other kinds of works where they're looking specifically into the visionary realms and bringing out the, you know, the numerous kind of visionary art type painters and things like that, would feel very comfortable in having adopted the model of the shaman, I guess, as a archetype for how to view what they're doing. If they're trying to get out of the box of contemporary artist, you know, one that is making art to fit in with the trajectory of art history as it's been explained in the university and in the art school. Most art schools don't go into shamanism 101 or something like that. You know, you've got to, or art schools, they just don't deal with this, you know, how to access your unconscious and bring it forward. Now, meanwhile, they're probably home getting high, you know, and learning it for themselves, but they don't have the context, they don't have the cultural context in which to view what they're doing as some kind of sacred quest. And numerous tribal or entheogenically based cultures, they've got a way for people to, you know, get into the job of becoming a shaman. And so it's why I stop short of calling artists shamans, because I have a great respect for the shamanic profession. It just can't be thrown around willy-nilly. It's a very difficult and arduous kind of thing. It's like a real yogi going into the cave and meditating for a long time and suffering their privations and encountering their demons and all the rest of this. It can bring people close to physical death, you know, in some of these arduous vision quests that they need to go on and stuff. So, you know, the Western art student who, you know, gets out and paints pictures and things like that and calls himself a shaman, I just, you know, that it doesn't ring right. But if they are accessing the visionary realm and they're journeying and are intending at least to bring benefit to their community through their visions and things like that, I'd say that there's a strong relationship between the profession of the shaman and the profession of the artist. Now there's numerous events, like we've spoken of, rock shows and things like that. There's definitely different kinds of events that are more tribal than others. And we can look at the Burning Man festivals and at the rave and trance party kind of situations where people will go. They'll probably be in an altered state of consciousness, and their reality is modeled by and influenced by either the music, the artwork, the various kinds of things that have been provided in those environments. And so they're making environments to journey in for fellow journeyers. And so in situations like that, and also in the sort of the fever pitch of certain rock concerts, the ecstatic function and the psychopomp kind of function of the shaman for their culture, that is to bring forth a sacred understanding of reality, in the fever of the crescendos of Jimi Hendrix or of Tool or of various kinds of amazing rock and roll performers, they elicit this intangible, mysterious, sacred reality. And in the same way that perhaps dances around a fire or the taking of mushrooms that was lorded over by the curanderos or the different kind of shaman who would administer ayahuasca to their group and things like that, that they're helping to control an altered state of reality by singing their Icaros, their songs of the soul that will keep people centered toward their healing reality and toward their love of life and healing and things like that. And so there is a relationship between what's going on in these sort of tribal cultures that are shamanically based in their understanding of sacred reality and the new kind of tribalism that has come forward in the raves or the rock shows or Burning Man and various performance artist kinds of works and things like that. And the kind of nihilist sensibility that emerges from a rational point of view that has not experienced the sacred and perhaps has been disappointed in love and perhaps has seen the depth of cruelty and malice that humanity can bring forward onto the world, onto each other. Anybody who's deeply looked into the trauma of human history might sensibly become a nihilist if they had no idealism to guide them. Because the catastrophe that humanity has wrought upon the web of life in the 20th century, industrial poisons and various things that have brought numerous species to extinction and perhaps threatens our own. It's a sensible response to life, and that's why I think a lot of the punk rock bands and various artists who are lost in a dark, hellish despairing and traumatized space are still making the soul perceptible, even though it's a nihilist point of view. It's true. It has a truth to it and an emotional value that is worthy of expression. And it is a caustic and destructive force at the same time. If we're only immersed in the recognition of the foulness and suffering of life, we've only grasped the first noble truth. Life is suffering, or life is perpetual unsatisfactoriness, however you want to put it. That's a fairly nihilist statement, but it was from the Buddha. And so, fortunately, there were four noble truths. And the whole sense of the sort of nihilist point of view only grasps hold of the hell realms and doesn't bring us forward into a way that we can view our lives as a journey. It's, in the nihilist point of view, there's no exit. And we're trapped in a miserable hell realm. And as I was saying, it has a certain validity. But at the same time, it's a limited understanding of what life can be. Valid, important to recognize, but important to move from as well. As in alchemy, they talk about the putrescence bringing regeneration. And so this dark and chthonic energy that comes forward in nihilist works of various kinds. You can look at music, you can look at painting, you can look at cinema, wherever you want to find sort of expressions of this kind of darkened and hopeless, sort of flattened, flatland sensibility. Flatland in that there's no depth and meaning, no higher awareness of things. It's all just the surface of the material realm. And the nihilist takes the material world as its only world, its only dimension. And because, therefore, it's collapsed any potential for finding the sacred, since all is only surface, then life becomes meaningless. And this is a kind of a trance as well that people can get locked into. I was locked into it for a certain phase of my life. Sometimes I just love art in general. Just that there is such a wonderful thing that humans have always done as make art, make music, make something, create. I'm just so excited that it exists at all. It's just like falling in love and finding that there is actually somebody in the world who cares for you that much. It's so exciting that, and that there's art museums and that there's artists, most of all artists. And it really is the individuals that, anymore draw me in. I mean, the Michelangelo is my all-time favorite artist. One cannot rival him. It's like the mountain of Beethoven, you know. You can go a certain way up that mountain and maybe you've traversed a little bit of it, but it's an unscalable mount. It's like the Mount Everest of art. Michelangelo was an architect, the most divine draftsman. He was a painter extraordinaire and an unbelievable sculptor. He wrote sonnets. He was this kind of Renaissance human being that encompassed his culture and brought it forward. He embodied it and pointed in a new direction. And his last Pietà would have done Brancusi proud. It was a work of a modernist sensibility. I mean, here was a Gothic character who was deeply immersed in his Catholicism, and then started to hear the Neoplatonic points of view about the soul and its ability to be expressed through art, and the immortality of the soul, and how various religions were carrying some of the same truths. Some of the Neoplatonists were espousing such dangerous heresies at that time, that that all religions were one, and things like that, and that God was directly perceptible. One didn't have to go through an intermediary like a priest and things like that. So the understanding that there was a mystical reality that you could directly apprehend was at the basis of Michelangelo's profound works. It was coming through a Christian sensibility. So the Last Judgment features Christ in the center of the mandala in a swirl, a cascade of flesh that Christ was mirroring in his position like this. It was like he was a Taoist master. And some have interpreted his gaze as the wrathful Lord making this judgment call on the souls. But I've always felt, if you look at his face, it's very benign. It's not wrathful in the least. It's compassionate. It's sympathetic. And is basically saying, some are coming up and some are going down, and it's just kind of a swirl, heaven and hell. To me, this is every minute, every moment of our life is this cosmic swirl. My favorite artists from every culture are the ones who brought forth meaning and symbolism and mind-blowing, expansive, infinite nature of spiritual reality. And we can find it in the sacred art of all the different cultures. When we look at the Hindu philosophical portraits and things like that. I mean, I always love seeing the portraits of Krishna displaying his cosmic form with all the multiple heads and eyes and limbs and things. These attempts to depict the transcendental, mystical, visionary experience are the types of artwork that really excite me. And you can find them in the Buddhist Thangka paintings, where the different deities or the mandalas are formed, or the wrathful forms, or the beatific and peaceful Buddhas are there. Any artwork that's pointing at this sort of visionary realm are some of my favorite works of art. So many of these artists are anonymous. Any artwork, and most times it's sacred art, that's trying to depict this reality are the things that I've always become more drawn to. The symbolist painters of the 19th century, there's an artist named Jean Delville, and he was called a painter of astral forms. And he also was influenced by Theosophy, and as an artist whose work I feel strongly related to, he had a specific kind of mystical understanding of reality, and it came forward in his artwork. So Jean Delville has been a particularly influential painter to me, and he's one of my favorite painters as well. He's in some ways regarded as, I guess, a grade B painter. I don't know, by some. But to me, he's quite a beautiful, amazing symbolist painter who brought forward many of the understanding of Theosophy in his artwork, and he painted very spiritual beings, but that were not allied to a specific sacred art tradition, which is really what I'm trying to do as well. Likewise, there was a painter in the 20th century named Pavel Chilechev, and he was a painter born in Russia and came to Paris when the Russian Revolution occurred, and his family, which was of high and noble birth, it kind of became deposed. They fled to the hinterlands, and he fled to Paris because he wanted to become a young up-and-coming artist. He met Picasso and Braque and all the rest of the bohemian scene there. And he was kind of adopted by Gertrude Stein and Alice Toklas and some of those characters there. And his most famous work is Hide and Seek, which is in the Museum of Modern Art. And it's quite an extraordinary painting. It looks like both a hand and a foot. And it's really like a tree. And he was immersed in occultism and alchemy, and he brought forward these references quite intentionally in his painting. And in this way, he was a very unusual painter of his time. In the 30s and 40s and 50s, very few people were taking reference points from alchemy, say. And the occult was not really where many artists were looking. He also devised a kind of, and I've never been able to find out what was the direct cause of this influence, but he had a kind of X-ray vision, that he was bringing forward in his artwork that is very related to what I'm doing. And I think it was for many of the same reasons. He was piercing the veil of material reality, trying to show the living life that was going on inside of people, rather than strictly focus on surfaces. And so these were the same inspirations that brought me to this kind of spiritualized anatomy, and which I had started to do before really becoming familiar with Chiletev's work. But then I felt like, my God, he's done it all, when I'd seen his work. Fortunately, he hadn't done it all, but I would say that he's a very strong influence on my work, and the artist whose work my work could most be, I think, related to in the canon of 20th century painters. And so in my painting called Painting, which shows a painter painting, we have various kinds of artists in the peanut gallery there that are influencing the painter as they're painting. And Delville is one of them, and Chilichev is one of them. William Blake is a big one for me, because he was this independent sensibility who, although he was influenced by Christianity, his spirituality was quite idiosyncratic, and he went it alone. He did not kowtow to any kind of artistic establishment, and died a pauper, and is celebrated with exhibits at the Tate and the Metropolitan now, and is beloved by millions of people. But he suffered for his genius, I think, and his unyielding kind of character. So he's also a great archetype and an influence. He loved Michelangelo. I think Michelangelo, to him, was his favorite artist as well. So Michelangelo is also in the peanut gallery of the painters painting, as well as Frida Kahlo, who, she's one of my favorite artists as well. Here was somebody who was a troubled personality, but whose emotions came through very strongly in her self-portraits. And those, I think, especially, anyone can see this wounded deer, you know, basically a human-animal hybrid, you know, that's pierced by arrows. It's got the face of Frida, but the body of a deer. And she was intensely vulnerable, and she made her vulnerability and depth of her emotions visible through her self-portraits. The great self-portrait painters like Rembrandt, who's also one in the peanut gallery of this painting. Here was a person who could paint a human soul. There was something unbelievable about his ability to render flesh. It looked like it was breathing and palpable. The delicacy and the nuances that you associate, say, with your grandmother's hanging flesh, you know, Rembrandt could make it look real. And he had a very mysterious way of drawing us into the works. And for me, some of his most powerful works are his self-portraits. And those are ones that just, you know, you can peer right into him, and it's as though he's standing before you. You can become the artist just by losing yourself in the work. And Van Gogh was the same way. Frida Kahlo was the same way. They each made these self-portraits that showed the depth of their search for who they were and what they were, and brings us right into that longing and search when we look into their soul through looking into their eyes of their self-portraiture. So those are amazing artists to me. Hieronymus Bosch, he's sort of the last one that was in this painting of painting, and he's kind of like the granddaddy of visionary art. His works are astonishing. They're so jewel-like, and so the architecture that he would put in the Garden of Earthly Delights is still beyond even Frank Gehry, and nobody's done this kind of weird fruit animal hybrid architecture yet. You know, not even the most bizarre architects have come up with these similar kind of jewel-like mindscapes that Bosch was dealing in. He portrayed the heavens and hells and the souls ascending to the hereafter, and He covered the gamut and had an imagination that was unparalleled. So all of those artists I bow in gratitude and recognition of their supreme contribution to the enjoyment and the deepening and enrichment of humanity. A sacred space is a place of initiation into sacred reality. These ideas about sacred reality change from culture to culture a bit. And we find temples and chapels and various pagodas and mandala sort of forms, and the stupas and various other kinds of religious architecture throughout world culture. We see the great pyramids and all the various kinds of sacred architecture. I believe that these sacred spaces of initiation are specific to each of these cultures and key one into the understanding of the spirit that these cultures represented. Now in the 21st century, in the third millennium, with a more global sensibility and emerging what I think of as world spirit, we have an opportunity to create a kind of universal sacred art. And it may seem a naive or a idealistic kind of goal, but informed by all world sacred art and also the individual's own experience of these mystical realms, I believe it's possible that we can make various kinds of sacred spaces that are not confined to one religion or another, but speak to a more universal spirituality for humanity. And I would like to create the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors. A sacred mirror is something that wouldn't just reflect your physical presence, but would reflect your soul as well, or whatever you take to be your sacred element. In this chapel, we have the sacred mirrors that go through the physical, tangible, material realm, the body and all of its anatomical features, the nervous system, cardiovascular system, skeleton, all the things that make up our physical body, and then the socio-political realm of the individual, where we have specific races and genders and things like that. You put skin on a person, they're an individual. Can we relate to and see through the surfaces of the skin to see how each individual is a mirror of ourselves? This is part of the question and part of why these are set up in this kind of sequence. You look through the body, and then you look through your socio-political identity, and then it moves on to the spiritual reality, or the archetypes of the energies that surround us and that move through us, and the specific religious archetypes that influence us. These are elements of our identity just as our physical body is. And so to take the body and mind and spirit of an individual and go through that sort of sequence, that's one aspect of this chapel. Those are the Sacred Mirror series. Then there's the progress of the soul paintings that go from an individual who's praying to the act of finding a loved one, the beloved, and kissing, and love-making, and pregnancy, and birth, and all the sequence in the journey of life, bringing out images like nursing and the different kind of interrelationship with the family, and mostly emphasizing the connection of love. And this, to me, is what makes life worthwhile. And I want the chapel to point to and underscore that which makes life worth living. And it will also have what I call the World Prayer Wheel, that will be a stained glass globe, a geodesic sphere of the earth that is supported by prayers from all different world spiritual paths, and that by turning it, one can sort of turn the world. So it's basically sacred architecture that's about beings inside of beings inside of beings. And the individual is situated inside of shells of greater and greater being. And so what will happen when the person, turns the World Prayer Wheel, they become more world-centric in their identity. After they've gone through this sort of body, mind, spirit, then they enter into the collective and see how we're all important in making the world go round, and that we're also part of one greater cosmic being.